Hi, I'm Dave Annell. Welcome to the fifth episode of Setting the Record Straight. As many of you may know, my good friend and former colleague Audrey Collins passed away last weekend. For those of you who didn't know her, Audrey was one of the greatest genealogists of our time. Her particular area of expertise was the records of the General Register Office, and I don't just mean the birth, marriage and death records themselves. Audrey immersed herself in that vast collection of records relating to the running of the GRO, from the staff at Somerset House, the local registrars, the census office clerks, everyone and everything from top to bottom, and developed an unrivaled expertise in this important area. She was also, like me, a major advocate of evidence-based research, and we felt very much the same about the way that data is presented to us by the major genealogical websites. One of her particular bugbears was the way that genealogy is sold as a purely online activity, and she would always remind people that despite the amazing online access that we have to many of the key family history sources, you really can't do it all online. As she liked to put it, sometimes you have to go to a place and look at a thing. And that's exactly what I did yesterday, making a trip into London to go to two places, the London Metropolitan Archives and the City of Westminster Archive Centre. Our local archives are home to hundreds of thousands of documents, and the vast majority of these documents are not available online. I want to share with you some of the documents that I looked at yesterday. So we'll start with this. It's a will, and it was proved in the Consistory Court of London in October 1622. You might think that being a London will proved in one of the major London probate courts, that it might just be included in Ancestry's London probate database. But you'd be wrong, because when it came to digitising these London wills, Ancestry chose to digitise the original wills and not the registered copies. And the two collections are far from being an exact match. And this here, the will of Nicholas Byfield, is just one of many hundreds of London wills that you won't find via the Ancestry website. Now, the way into these undigitised documents is via the archive's website. So we'll have a look at this. This is the entry relating to that will. It's the only reference you're going to find online to this will, and you have to really go looking for it. And unless you know where to expect to find the will, you're going to struggle to find it. But anyway, that's a reference to the will. That's where you can find them. And also, this is another document that I looked at yesterday. This is called the Graves Book, and it relates to the parish of St Mary's, Paddington Green, Westminster. And it's very little description on the catalogue. It doesn't really tell you much about what it is, but if we have a look at the document itself, this is the lovely front cover of the book, and this is the sort of information you get. So it's a very close link to the burial register for the parish, but it tells you a little bit more. So, for example, this top one here is a gentleman called John Lem of Chapel Street, Park Lane, and it says he's buried in the family grave, and there's a head and footstone on the east bank of the south end of the old ground. It tells us he was 39. The next entry is for Elizabeth Wileman of 30 Star Street. And then we've got a few other entries here. This one I particularly like. This is a man called Shenton Willett Flood of Maida Vale, aged 86. And it says, in Mrs. Whedon's grave. So it's suggesting a connection to someone called Mrs. Whedon. That's a very interesting link that we would want to follow up. And here, this Robert Jupp of Portman Place, aged 67, is buried in James Morris Bebb's grave. So fantastic extra information. Now, obviously, these records don't exist for every parish, but the way that you will find them is by searching for that parish on the relevant archival catalogue, and then just having a look down the list to see what they've got. And if we go back and have a look at this, you'll see that the parish records for St Mary's, Paddington, there's a load of really useful things. Most of these are not going to be available through Ancestry. All these records here, these graves books, these copies of burial entries, etc. There's a lot of additional information, vast amount of additional information that simply is not available through Ancestry. Now, we'll go back and have a look at another document that I looked at yesterday. This is from a church book of Fetter Lane Independent Chapel, covering dates 1722 to 1783. Again, there's not a huge amount in the catalogue about what exactly is covered, but when you look at this, there's lists of members of the church here being admitted and the dates in which they were admitted, but several of them give their date of death. And that can be, well, you don't need me to tell you how valuable that information could be for your research. Even here we have this Mrs. Martha Bodycott here, who's admitted on the 28th of June 1758. It says now Carmichael, so she had later married someone called Carmichael. And this is the sort of thing that can be so helpful with family history research, because it's got some sort of inbuilt provenance. It's not just a theory that this Mrs. Mary Hopkins may have died, maybe the Mary Hopkins who died on the 25th of June 1769. You know that it's the right person because the church has created that record and added that detail. So it's got what we could definitely call inbuilt provenance. I also went to the Westminster Archives, and this is one register that I looked at. It's an admission register to the Greycoat School in Westminster. This is for girls being admitted in the 1830s. So we've got the name of the girl, we've got when they were born, we've got their parents' residence, by whom presented. So this will be the person who recommended them or supported their application, when presented, when admitted, when 14, and the date of leaving. So fantastic information, really useful. There's another register here that I looked at relating to boys being admitted at an earlier period. So we've got their names, dates of birth, the date they were admitted, the governors. So again, that's who recommended them. But this bit on the right is particularly interesting. It says when bound apprentice to whom, etc., etc. So we've got this one here, bound to Thomas Jones of Mount Street, mathematical instrument maker. And I love this one. I noticed down at the bottom here, went on a trial voyage and was pressed into the Orlando frigate. So there's a story behind that you definitely want to follow up if that was the person that you were interested in. So let's bear Audrey's wise words in mind. You can't do it all online. Sometimes you do have to go to a place and look at a thing. Thanks for listening. Look out for more episodes of Setting the Record Straight on my YouTube channel.